Hey guys, this is Jay Calderon with Jay Unboxing here, giving you a personal prediction for Canelo Alvarez versus Caleb Plant, which of course will be taking place this weekend. Also, going to be giving you a quick pick for the co-featured bout of that evening between junior welterweights Elvis Rodriguez and Juan Pablo Romero. Just a little bit of a heads up, by the way, I am a little bit under the weather, so if you do notice a little bit of a tickle in my voice or a scratchiness to it or whatever it might be, that's all it is. It's nothing serious or major, but just kind of working through that right now. Probably just sick from that terrible pick I had with Zepeda and Vargas last weekend, but nonetheless, I will chug along and survive. So, would love to hear all your takes for these fights as well and your predictions down in the comments section below. So, we can get into these now. Starting with the main event here, we got a little bit of a fight info kind of breakdown for you here. We have Canelo Alvarez, who is the world super middleweight champion, also holds the WBC, the WBA, and the WBO versions of the title, taking on Caleb Plant, who holds the IBF version of the title. This is going to be taking place at the MGM Grand Las Vegas, Nevada, on pay-per-view, of course, in the super middleweight division. This is definitely one of the biggest fights of the year. It's a very, very good fight. And while the odds might not agree with how close it might appear to a lot of people, and more on that in a little bit, it's a fight that has some fans genuinely curious as to which fighter will win. Alvarez is rightfully the favorite, with his defensive ability as well as his punching power. But the slick skills of Caleb Plant and his technical prowess could cause the Mexican superstar some problems. So, without much more ado, let's get into the breakdown. So for Alvarez here, I think he needs to attack the body early and often. I think if he's trying to headhunt too much, especially with the fighter who has quicker feet than him in Plant, he's going to be made to miss quite a bit more and runs the risk of running himself into the ground and getting tired because, of course, it costs more of your energy when you're having to swing all the way through and hitting nothing but air. If he attacks the, rather large torso of a guy like Plant and continues to dig to the body the way that he can, especially with the left hook, does a couple things for him. Lowers the guard down, makes him easier to hit, makes him slower, takes some of the speed and crispness out of his shots. And of course, Plant is not a huge puncher to begin with, so you're really zapping a lot of his real overall strengths by attacking the breadbasket. That's something that Canelo needs to do early and often so that it pays dividends as soon as possible in the fight. I would also say make sure to double the jab while stepping in. Plant has a decent reach advantage. I think it's about 2 or 3 full inches on Canelo, and as a result of that, his jab is going to get there first a lot of times if they're in that kind of perfect zone for him and just outside the zone of where Canelo will want the action to take place. One of the ways that Canelo can neutralize that without having to just run in or jump in with reckless abandon is by doubling up the jab. Maybe willing to take the jab initially or sometimes, or taking something off of it or timing it from Plant and then landing with his second strong jab as he steps in. That will allow him to press his man back, which he's looking to do anyway, but also make sure that he's winning or being competitive in the battle of the jabs as the fight progresses. This, of course, will then lead to all the other shots in his toolbox having a much better chance of landing when Plant is having to deal with that jab. Finally, I would say look to land the counter left hand. I think it's a shot that's going to be there for him. Plant has a tendency to lean over to his right a little bit, especially when he's trying to kind of get out of harm's way, throwing a jab and then just trying to roll with the shot. Well, Canelo has very fast, explosive hands of his own, and if he can time that left hook, for example, properly, it's going to be a shot that I think Plant will lean rather into, and that could really create that kind of double impact effect. He can also do it with a little bit of a left uppercut, depending on exactly how far Plant is leaning down, and he will lean down quite a bit sometimes, but that left hand really kind of looking to counter with it as Plant is trying to use one of those defensive moves, I think can be very effective for Canelo. Now, for Plant to win, I think he needs to use your legs for movement and angles. And I emphasize angles as well because it can't just be him running around the ring the entire fight. This is for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't think that Canelo's going to allow that to happen. If he's just trying to box and move the entire fight, I think Canelo's going to track him down and probably end up stopping him. If he's able to twist him and turn him and step into these, awkward angles that forces Canelo to have to repivot and reset and then is making him pay with shots over the top, he has a much better time. This is, of course, going to mean that he's not having to use as much movement, but he's also breaking down his opponent. He has to be able to do both. The other reason is from just an aesthetic feel. You don't want to give the judges the impression that the entire fight, that could be very, very ticky-tacky if you're being negative the entire encounter, is all one-sided action with Canelo going forward. Whether fair or not, there are a lot of judges, especially in Nevada, who favor action, and if you're only moving backwards, you're playing into that potential narrative. And as I sort of kind of alluded to it in the keys for Canelo there, Plant really cannot dip to his right hand side. Don't dip off to your right hand side. That has to be the key there because he will get caught with that left hand. Canelo has a very good lead left hand. It's as good as his power shot is, which is the right hand for an orthodox fighter. He can really do damage with it to the body. He can do it in the form of a hook. He can corkscrew it into a little bit of an uppercut, as he kind of did against Billy Joe Saunders. This is a shot that he will be able to land if Plant is leaning into the shot and making it much easier for him to do from a reach perspective as well. Especially if you're someone like Plant who doesn't have huge authoritative power that's going to force Canelo to have to think about where he's placing his shots. If Canelo feels like he can take your power, he will take it. He'll risk taking it just to get those bigger shots off himself, and if that happens too often in the fight, Plant will pay for it. And finally, I think it's super important that Plant controls the battle of the jabs. This is important for the very obvious reasons. As I mentioned again, in terms of the Canelo narrative, you do not want him getting off those single or double jabs. If you're Plant, you want to make sure you're jabbing, keeping it out there, you're forcing him, you're creating the perfect space for you to be able to move, for you to be able to land your shots, for you to be able to pivot, for you to be able to back up if you need to. Whatever you need to do, you have to make sure it's all dependent, or rather, it is dependent on that jab, so you have to make sure you're getting that jab out there. That can only lead to success for Plant because, quite frankly, he will then have the angles, he'll have the reach, and of course, this will frustrate Canelo, who could potentially be walked into more and more mistakes that Plant makes him pay for. Now, in terms of my picks here, I can see the attractiveness in picking Plant. Like Erislandy Lara and Floyd Mayweather, fighters that have troubled Canelo in the past, Plant is a solid boxer with good movement and technique. However, there are a few differences here. For starters, both Mayweather and Lara have shown an ability to do this at a high level pretty consistently before and even after, of course, the Canelo Alvarez fight. Number two, they did it against a version of Canelo that Plant won't be facing because Canelo has gotten better and bigger on top of that. Ultimately, my pick has to be Canelo. I can see no reason to pick Plant until he gives me a reason to think he can win, and he hasn't. He has not faced nearly the opposition that Canelo has, and there are plenty of fighters who have a little bit of this or a little bit of that, whether it's technical skills like a Daniel Jacobs or certainly more power in a guy like a Gennady Golovkin or a defensive genius in Floyd Mayweather. And yes, he lost the fight to Mayweather, but at a much younger age when he was a smaller man. He's learned from that, and that will pay dividends in this fight. Plant might not get knocked out cold, but he will get stopped in the mid to late rounds, in my opinion, as he wears down and either his corner or the referee waves the white flag due to the onslaught of punishment that's coming his way. Alvarez via, I'll go late round stoppage. For that co-featured bout, we have Elvis Rodriguez versus Juan Pablo Romero. It's a division junior welterweight, of course, and it's a decent little fight. It's not by any means a great fight, but considering the main event, this is about as good as you were going to get. With Rodriguez, he's a fighter that finds himself somewhere in the middle as a fighter, a boxer that can punch, but one that looks to try and set up his work. On the positive side, that means he's not reckless and he tries to set traps and force you into mistakes. However, it means if someone takes the initiative and makes it their kind of fight from the outset, Rodriguez might end up finding himself in positions where he's playing catch-up. As a result, Rodriguez needs to jab his way inside, throw shots down the middle as Romero is susceptible to them, and look to press his Mexican counterpart backwards. That's going to give him the best shot to take an early lead, take control of the fight, and go on to win it. With Romero is only effective if he's coming forward. He's a bit slow of foot, and backing up just leaves him with not enough pop in his shots because he's stepping away from the momentum of those shots. That means he needs to jab, set up some of those shots to the body as well, and march forward. What he can't do is stay on the outside or get pressed back and let Rodriguez dictate the action or get too picky with his own activity rate. He needs to be active. For Romero, the fight will be best fought if he's able to press Rodriguez, open up his shot selection, and really allow for himself to put power into those punches. If he's the man going backwards, it could be a long night for the Mexican. Ultimately, with my pick here, the man that comes forward has the best chance, and I think that will end up being Rodriguez. He's a little more skilled, has the slightly faster hands and feet, and simply has a bit more nuance to his work. So he's going to be able to, maybe after a while of going back and forth with trading, as long as they can hold up to the shots, I think Rodriguez will push him back and keep the fight relatively close, because I think Ramirez probably has enough pop to do that and has a decent enough chin, but I'm leaning towards Rodriguez winning a decision. So Rodriguez via unanimous decision. Now, the betting odds for this are a little bit all over the place for the main event. In the main event, you have Canelo Alvarez at a minus 1250 with Plant coming in at a plus 630. These, in my opinion, are nonsense odds. I do favor Alvarez. I don't think Plant has shown what he's capable of doing against the top level of super middleweight. That being said, he's not a slouch, and the idea that you're getting 6-1 odds for him in a fight of this magnitude seems a little bit off to me. I could see somewhere around the 400 mark, 350 even. It is a much closer fight. Maybe, late money will potentially dictate that kind of, where that's set ultimately, but seems a little high to me. That being said, if you're a genuine firm believer in Plant, those are some amazing odds, and you want to take advantage of them, in my opinion, because if you were willing to think he was going to win anyway, laying a small bet on him at a 6-1 odds is fantastic. If you're a Canelo fan, you stay away from a straight up moneyline bet. There is no room for you there. In terms of that co-featured bout, you do have Rodriguez coming out as a minus 280, with Romero as a plus 205, relatively close. About 3-1 for Rodriguez. Not again sure enough about him at this point in his career to lay much money on it there. If you want to keep it interesting, you could take a slight long shot in Romero, but for the most part, I'd be more willing to bet on something like an over-under in that fight, just because I do think most people suspect a knockout in that fight. I actually am predicting a decision, so I could maybe find some money there to make, but for the most part, these are not scintillating odds by any means. In any event, my prediction record heading into the weekend is 37, 15, and 3 with 11 exact. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Would love to hear your thoughts, predictions, your bets, all of that stuff. Love to hear it. Please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and follow. Also wrote a piece on Caleb Plant and the steroid accusations that he made about Canelo in the lead up to the fight, and really just the pointing out of the steroid scandal that Alvarez once suffered. Link will be in the description box for my take on that. You can also get in hold of me on Twitter at jcaldron_job, and you can email me at junboxing@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you there also. Be sure to check out junboxing.com for schedule, results, betting odds, rankings, all that good stuff. And as always, I'm running out of voice here, so I gotta let you go. Until next time.